This is Real Life with Deb Waterbury, a real show for real people with real issues. And now, here's your host, Dr. Deb Waterbury.
Well, welcome to this episode of Real Life with Deb Waterbury. I'm here with Dwight.
Hi.
We are right in the middle of our series on grief. And, you know, we've had some great discussions this month with some grief specialists, actually, people who are specialized in dealing, Bobby and her husband, Bob. Bobby and Bob Real.
Yes.
Talking because they run a recovery group specifically for grief. And we've talked about grief over our sins. We've talked about just the definition of grief. We've had a lady on, Sally Knipe, who wrote a book about how she grieved and some practical steps through grieving. Mm-hmm. So as we move through this, and I thought that the last one we should do is kind of our grief over loss. And that's what Dee and I want to talk about today is what that looks like to grieve over loss. Why is that part of our life? I mean, you know, we wonder why that even has to be part of what we do. Why do we have to have grief, especially over loss? But we do. And loss is so much bigger than just someone passing away.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. Grief and loss, that covers so much.
And sometimes, you know, we can even suffer loss and then grief over that loss almost on a day-to-day basis, depending on what season of life you're in.
Right.
I mean, I'm noticing that the older that I get, the more I'm losing. And it ain't weight.
And it's not your mind.
Sometimes it is my mind,
it could be.
but it ain't off my rear end. Things, you know, my children grow up and move away. Friends, the older I get, the more apt I am to have friends who are passing away, moving in different stages of life. I'm moving into a different stage of my life, and you can grieve the loss of what you knew.
Yeah, or like retiring from a job or things like that.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about grief over loss, what that looks like for the believer, how we can kind of move through that. You know, the Bible speaks specifically to loss and speaks specifically to how they will be comforted. And I think that we have to recognize that God is not he's not silent and he's not absent, and he's there, actually says he will comfort those who lose, who have had lost things. So obviously you'll know that the verse I'm referring to is in Matthew 5 in the Beatitudes, where he says, "Blessed are those who mourn, so they shall be comforted." And you know, and the fact that you know that we're going to mourn things, and you're going to mourn the loss of life, loss of marriage, loss of just situations in your life. But God said that we're blessed when we mourn. Now, so why would you think that? Because I mean, you look at that and think, what does that mean? That you're being blessed are those who mourn. What does that mean?
I mean, for me, it thinks like blessed because I mourn because I can. Sometimes you think you survived it.
Right.
Almost. Still, the blessings come from that you have a heart that even cares. So just that itself.
Absolutely. And you are blessed as a believer. Everybody's going to mourn. Believer, non-believer, we're in this world. We live in a fallen world. Mourning over loss, having hard things happen, that is just part of this life.
It's a given.
So a believer, and I believe what Jesus a lot is saying here, is that the believer is blessed when they mourn because they will find comfort.
Yes.
There is no comfort from the world when you lose.
Nope.
Anything. But it's
not the here.
No,
that's
not comforting.
No.
The only eternal comfort you will get is from God.
Yes.
And so therefore then the believer, those who know Jesus, they're blessed even as they mourn because they have a God who is going to comfort them. Psalm 147 verse 3 says, "He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds." Now, you know, I thinking of having a broken heart and being wounded, like physically wounded, it does feel like that. I mean, it can feel like you have this open, gaping wound. I know some of you who are watching right now or listening know exactly what I mean. Have you ever been through a period in your life where you really felt like there was a gaping, bleeding wound?
Deb, I have a scar that goes from here to here. And the gaping wound is interesting that I was wounded long before that ever happened. And thinking about I don't know what we were talking about earlier, but thinking about how when we grieve something, it may, thank goodness, open up something that needs to be. So I remember when I lost a very, very here's a contract, sign a contract, you have a job. Here's a job. 3 months later, this job doesn't exist. It's a sure thing. How can it be gone? And when I lost that job, it opened up that old grief and loss of my mother dying that I had never grieved.
Wow.
So in a sense, it was like sometimes I want my heart to be broken and open so that he has the opportunity to heal those wounds.
That's true. And and if you think about a surgeon, you think about a doctor, and you're a nurse, so you know this, that if you have an infected wound,
the first thing they do,
clean that puppy out.
Open it up.
Exactly. and the wound will get bigger.
Actually, even today, sometimes they leave them open.
Yes.
They don't even close them because you don't want to close it, because then that's what can cause the infection. So thinking about if we've lost something, you can just push on through, or I'm not going to be sad over that. You could be doing yourself a disservice.
As a matter of fact, you probably are.
Because God wants it open. He wants to fill that wound and heal it.
Absolutely, and heal it. And it says that he will bind up their wounds.
Oh, I love
Now,
it.
when he says he's going to bind up your wounds, he means binding them in the healing process, which, as you say very appropriately, often means they've got to be open for a bit. And, I tell people often, women and men too, but women when I'm counseling them and telling them, if you've got this wound, and if you no matter what's happened in your heart, you've had a divorce, you've been molested, whatever, you've sinned, you've been sinned against, you've got this wound. If you would picture this physical wound, which it's very much like, it does have to get bigger to get cleaned out.
Yeah.
And then be open for a bit until it's healed. And as it heals, then the doctor will close it up, and so that you still have the scar,
right?
And that's okay. The scars remind you where you came from, but it does get healed. God does that, and then it becomes the healing that lasts forever.
Forever.
Because otherwise, you're going to deal with it again, like you did.
Yeah, and I think of the scar as not only a reminder, but it is a testimony.
Yes,
it's an absolute testimony.
Yes,
look what God did.
Yeah, there's that song out right now, "Thankful for the Scars."
Oh yes,
and because I've got loads of them. If you could see on my physical body the scars that are inside of me, I would look like the
Frankenstein.
Yes, I was going to say bride of Frankenstein, but thank you for making me a man.
It's a monster, but that's what the scars do to us.
Yes.
If we leave them if we don't let those wounds heal properly, then it kind of, in a sense, makes you be a monster.
Yes.
Like my grief or my loss or my anger or my hurt over this thing in the past can absolutely affect this thing that I have right now.
That's exactly
and
right.
now I'm the monster.
That's
now
exactly
I'm like,
right.
I'm not patient, I'm not loving because I haven't healed or let God heal that grief that loss or that
very
brokenness.
Good. And that, part loss is going to be part of this world. It's part of your life. You're going to lose. We said this a minute ago. And I know there are loads and loads of different kinds of loss.
Yes, no one's is the same.
Yeah, so tell me besides loss to death, what are some other losses that people suffer?
Well, I was just thinking about people that have had tragic accidents that change them for life, So you're used to being, maybe it's the husband that's the breadwinner and he becomes, paralyzed or something.
Yes.
That is loss. That is loss of especially a man that's used to, providing and being the caregiver.
Right.
Now he is depending on people to take care of him. So that is a huge loss.
Yes.
I'm thinking about, just even moving. I mean, I think about little kids. Oh my gosh, when you move and they lose their little friends and just the loss of friends. Or a lot of people, the world is so where people can work from abroad now. It's like, or their companies send them abroad. So just moving away from something that
loss of familiarity.
Yeah,
and home.
Yeah.
That's good. Bobby actually talked a lot about that in one of our other episodes in terms of thinking that there's so many different kinds of loss. So the trick is, I think, as for any human, is to figure out how to, you don't want to not deal with it, as you just got to say a minute ago, you need to deal with it. So and there are many ways to deal with it. I do think you need to talk about stuff. I think that it's so important that you have someone to talk to, which is wonderful why we have some Christian organizations like Bobby's that deals with these things on a Christian level. You have your best friends, your friends, your pastor, whatever. But even beyond that, for the believer, there is a necessary component, I think, in dealing with the grief from loss. And for me, it is understanding that this is all temporary.
Yeah, that we have the victory. I feel like almost like loss and grief or sadness is something that the devil still thinks that he gets credit for.
Right.
And in all actuality, even God.
Yes.
God knows all of this is happening. So don't even give the devil credit for that.
That's right.
Once I mean, there's these stages of grief and all of this stuff we're supposed to experience, but it's like, don't give the devil credit. Seek your Father. Look to him. Lord, what are you showing me in this? What is the next step you have for me? What are you working on me?
Yes.
You know, we have these things that we like to say to people when they're experiencing grief or loss, and a lot of times they're not the right thing to say.
Yes.
But it's like, Lord, what do you have for me? And we even talked about that. Being able to just be okay talking about, I am really sad that happened.
Right.
And being comfortable even just listening to somebody. You don't have to say anything.
No, that's very good.
Because most people that experience grief or loss, they actually just need to talk about it. And then when you can hear what's coming from within your heart, then that's almost like you hearing the voice that God has put inside of you.
Very good.
Sister, this is not where I want you to be. Telling every single person, now you should be, but the Lord is going to sustain me.
Yes, very good. And you know, understanding that's so good that loss here is not the end game.
Temporary.
And so when you're talking about it, when you're dealing with these kinds of losses, there has to be this mindset that you have more ahead of you. And if you don't know that before the loss hits, you're not going to know it in the middle of the loss.
Right, that's not the time to...
No, you have to know it beforehand. So if you're suffering loss right now and you're watching this, first please hear me and Dee both tell you how sorry we are that you're feeling this. Yes, because this is not God's perfect plan for you. His perfect plan for us without sin is that we would not suffer any loss or grief. However, we're on this earth and we're going to. So he grieves with you. However, beyond that, it's not about putting it aside. It is about moving through it to the next place God has for you. And, you know, grief is one of those things that you have to feel. You can't put it aside and say, I'm not going to feel this, because you will feel it eventually. You may as well go ahead and feel it now.
Yes.
But in the midst of all of that feeling of grief, whether it's over loss, whether it's over a change, whatever it is that you're grieving, as you're feeling it, as you're moving through it, just hanging on to God, it will be the comfort that you need to get through it. It doesn't make it easy. Nobody's going to lie to you and tell you, I hope, that if you just trust God, it'll be easy.
No way.
Because that's not true. But if you just trust God, there's an end. There's an end game. There's hope. We are the only ones, believers are the only ones who have hope. And that hope comes even in the midst of grief, over loss or any kind of grief that you suffer. I've suffered much grief over things that I've done and have been done to me.
Right.
Grief over loss of a loved one, grief over loss of a relationship, over loss, period.
Right.
We all have. There's another side to grief for the believer, though. I don't believe that there is another side for someone who doesn't know Jesus, not a real other side.
And I think of how the Christians surround people in loss. And a lot of times there is nothing to be done.
Right.
Because you can't feel what that person that has had that loss is feeling.
Right.
But to know that you can protect them with prayer, that you can be there to comfort them.
Right.
Because that is like, think of the sick or wounded sheep laying there.
Yes.
We are here to protect them from anything else.
Yes,
so,
very good.
Man, no one can experience that, like you said, whatever they are going through.
Absolutely.
But to be there with them and around them and to protect them from anything else that may come while they are, it's almost like you told the story of the sheep out on the cliff and how God is going to come and scoop them up.
And understand, if you're the one that suffered the loss and people are trying to come around you, allow
them.
Yeah, allow that to happen. You don't have to have your privacy trounced on, and I know there can be times where you just want to be by yourself, but allow the love of your brothers and sisters to comfort you, because even though you think it may not bring you comfort, it will, and it will help move you through this process. You can't get around it. You can't stop it. You can't alter it. You're going to have to move through the process. It's easier to move through the process with your brothers and sisters comforting you. Yes. So allow that. Be vulnerable enough to allow that. You're not strong enough. None of us are strong enough.
Especially during this time.
But God is strong in us, and our believing brothers and sisters can come around you. This is a difficult series. It's been a difficult series.
I was going to say,
Grief is one
Thanks
of those,
for sharing it with me.
Grief is one of those things that we all suffer all the time. But there's a right way to move through it, and then there's a way that's not necessarily wrong, but detrimental, and might even make it longer. So I just wanted to share with you over this course of this series some ways and some truths about grief, both in our lives, over the things we've done, over the things done to us, and then what that looks like practically. So I pray it's been a blessing to you. I pray that if you are suffering, that you will reach out to a believer, a friend, a pastor, a counselor, a Christian counselor preferably, and then mostly move into the arms of your Savior, because that's where comfort's going to come. Well, God bless you, and we'll be praying for you. Pray you have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining me today on this episode of Real Life with Deb Waterbury. I hope it's been a blessing to you as much as it was to me. You know, if you want any of my books or information on articles or any of my speaking engagements, you can go to my website at debwaterbury.com. God bless you.